Okay, so if you've watched the previous video, you will hopefully have made some 6-pointed stars. If you haven't, go back, make some. And now we're going to look at insetting your linen diamonds in between your 6-pointed stars. And we'll also do an edge piece along here just to show you what to do when you're insetting these bigger pieces. It's exactly the same process when you set your hexagon into your stars. If you have a look at the pattern, I'll show you what's the best way to do it. But the process of actually piecing the sections into the stars is exactly the same for the hexagon as it is the edge. Okay, so I've got a 6-pointed star, I've got an inset diamond in the natural linen, and I'm going to piece another 6-pointed star to the other side of it. Okay, might move in a bit closer so you can see better. Okay, so get some thread. I've talked about thread before. I like the filigree thread. I can invariably thread the needle without taking too long, and I always do it's been called so many different things in so many classes, but I call it a smocker's knot. So we hold the needle at the eye, put the end of the thread and hold that at the eye, and then twist around maybe 3 times, and then pull that down the end of the thread, and we get a really nice knot. Okay, so we're going to sew like we did before up to this join, and then I'll show you what to do when we get to the essential, I suppose, Y seam. And Y seams in hand piecing are very different to machine piecing. I suppose we're still pivoting, but I suppose the most important difference is we are not going to sew through any seams. We want those seams to stay free, the seam allowances to stay free, and that way we get, I suppose, a smoother finish, and we also are able to press whichever way we want. And if you've listened to any of my other videos or read some of my blogs, I think pressing is really important to get you a really, I don't know, an extra texture that gives your quilt, I suppose, a little bit more amazingness, if there's such a word. Okay, so I've kept sewing and kept talking, and I haven't talked about anything. So I am basically doing a running stitch like before. I'm smoothing down as I go so that I don't, if I were to gather that, I would end up with a bit of a puckered look once I turn it over and press it. So we want to keep that smooth from the beginning. I've checked as I've sewn that my stitches are staying on the line on both sides. And when we get up to this point here, I'd probably go maybe another stitch closer. And keep your thumb on your stitching. Everything's smooth. Keep your thumb on your stitching here so it doesn't move too much. And we're just going to go through the end on the back and come up here at the front, and I'm going to do a little back stitch. And the reason I do that is I call it future-proofing your quilt. Not only does it keep your seams where they should be, it gives you a little bit of reinforcement at the joins. And so hopefully it's not going to fall apart in years to come. So I've done a back stitch, and now I'm going to go through the end here. Now I'm not going to catch any of my seams again. Before we had the seams that way and out the way, and now we want them this way and out the way. So I've just gone through the top linen diamond, and I'm going through to the next diamond, the yellow diamond, and I'm just going to make sure that I'm not catching anything. So I haven't gone through any of the white Betsy at all. Okay, so we're back on that side. So that's smooth. We've done our back stitch, and now we're going to pivot. So we're going to, my thread is up back here on the yellow. ready to go forward. And I just basically need to pivot my piece and turn it like that so that it lines up, and then we're going to sew along that edge. So I put some more pins in, again checking that my ends are matched up. And we'll put another couple of pins in. And so my thread is here at the beginning on the yellow, and I'm just going to do another little back stitch here so that I'm keeping it reinforced there. Okay, and so we just back stitch back to the beginning of the join, the linen, and then we can keep going forward. Just checking on the back that it's all staying on the lines, and that we're also going to smooth as we go and not gather. Remember, before you finish off the end, just smooth it down so that you're not getting that gather. Okay, so we're at the end, and I'm going to back stitch. If you wanted to join some more pieces to this, you could probably keep going with your thread, but I always like over stitching the end, or at the very least back stitching, so that it's sort of, yeah, it's reinforced at the joins. Okay, so we will just finger press that at the moment, or get one of your, if you've got the, I think it's Clover finger presser, use that as well. So just the heat of your hands. Now again, it's up to you which way you decide to press. You can press towards the linen and make the linen pop up, or you can do what I've done in my Linen Sisters quilt and press towards Liberty to make the Liberty fabric stars pop out. So I'm just smoothing that, and with the heat of my hands, that just presses nicely. Okay, so now we've got our first diamond set into our star. So we're going to then set in the other star, and I might speed that one up for you, and then we'll join in the edge piece. Okay, so you can see that we've sewn the other star here, and again I'm just going to use the heat of my hand to press the linen diamond towards the Liberty fabric, and just smooth it down as I go, just with the heat of my hand. Now you could take this to the iron if you wanted to and press it, but I think just with the heat of your hand is okay. And now we're going to set in an outside shape of the linen to make the edge. Okay, like that. Now, as I said before, it's exactly the same process setting in a hexagon. You're just going to have more stars joined together, and you can set your hexagon in that way. But we'll do the edges. And again, I'm going to flip it around so you can see. I'm going to join with the smallest piece towards me and sew it that way. So if you lay it out like that, you know that you're going to sew the right things. And I won't speed it up this time. We can call it slow stitching. You can watch. Okay, So again, pinning, pull that through to there so that we're pinning our edge of our star there. Get our ends matching up. And remember, we're having our seam allowances free, okay? So that when I go through to here, I'm going to basically move those seam allowances out of the way so that I'm not pinning or sewing through the seam allowances, okay? Got our ends, and smooth it all down, and then we can put them pins in properly. You can put 1 or 2 pins in between, it's up to you. I usually put 2. Usually sews a bit smoother that way. Okay, just in from the end, and a little back stitch. Checking as you go that you're staying on the line on both sides. That's the biggest way to come unstuck if you are not sewing on the line on both sides. So that's really important. I suppose the second most important thing is to check that you're not gathering. If I pull that too tight, I'm getting the gather. You can probably see it's a little bit puckered, so we need to smooth that down. I'd probably do a back stitch every now and again, just to keep it instead, but I suppose the most important thing is the back stitches at the joins. Take our pin out. Make sure our seam allowances are out the way. And that we're in the right spot. And we'll do a little back stitch. And now we're going to pivot like we did before. Okay, so I'm going to go through the linen. I'm going to turn over and get my seam allowances out the way. And I've pressed them that way so it's a bit easier that time. So no seam allowances are being pinned through or sewn through. So now my thread is on the other side on the Betsy fabric, and I'm going to pivot. Okay, so here's our stars like that. So I'm going to pivot and turn. Okay, and now we're going to sew along this line here. Now, if you want, you can put a pin in the middle, or you can just pin at the end. We might do a pin in the middle just to make sure that where linen does tend to move a bit. So if you just go through the end, basically the end here and the end there with your pin, and then get a crease at the middle. Slide that over your pin like that, get a crease at the middle. Pop your pin through that crease. And that's our point at which we're going to pin through the join here. Now I would do it through the linen, but when you're coming up close to the join, I'll show you what to do. So basically, we'll pin that there. That will get in a nice spot. And we'll put one here, out of the way. So you don't have to pin this end if you don't want straight away. You could just do up to the middle and pin. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I've only got like 3 pins with me and a needle. So I would only probably pin up to here and sew that, then put some more pins in, but that's personal choice, I suppose. Check you're on the thing on both sides, and basically we're going to do another back stitch like we did before. So basically our thread is here on the Betsy fabric, if you can see, and we're going to do a little back stitch to secure the join. And again, we're making sure that none of our seams are being sewn through. They're going to be folded out of the way. And we'll just talk amongst ourselves while we get up to the next join. So if you have a look on there, I'm not on the line, and you might think, oh, okay, that's not, can you see that? I'm not quite on the line. And you might think, oh, okay, that's not going to make a difference, but when you're on small pieces, it will, okay? It's just a matter of just sliding the linen a little bit. And let's get back on track. I think we only had 2 then. It sometimes goes like that. You might sew a big long seam and you might stay on the line the whole way without actually having to adjust. If you have a look, I'm off the line again. But sometimes you get good runs, sometimes you get bad runs. Sometimes you get knots in your thread and sometimes you don't. Okay. So I'm going up to this join here to sew through, and again I want my seam allowances to be free on both sides, and I don't want to catch them down. And so when I'm sewing along here, I'm feeling that I'm actually bringing the seam allowances out the way so they're not going to get caught. And again, remember to smooth as you go. Okay, so we're nearly up to the join, and we'll go through to the back. It'll be easier to see. Hold it all with your fingers and pull out your pin, and we're going to go through the end here like that, and I'm going through to the linen, and I'm making sure that I'm not catching any of this fabric or even the next Liberty diamond in. Okay, so we just make sure that's all free. Now if these were probably bigger pieces, I'd probably then smooth my seam allowances out and go down and do a little stitch through the center through to there. I don't think it's really that necessary for this one. So what we'll do is we'll take another stitch into the next diamond, the Liberty diamond, and we'll back stitch to that join. Okay, so we've just done a little back stitch, move our seam allowances out the way. A little back stitch to that join. And we'll keep sewing. You might find that your first 2 stitches of your running stitch might be on the line and the next 2 aren't. Just keep checking. And when we get up to the next join, we're going to nearly get up there. Pull that through. Take the pin out. We'll go down through the linen and just making sure the seam is out the way through to the what is it? I think this is Feather Meadow Liberty, the caramel coloured Liberty, and a little back stitch. And now through the linen. And I've got my thumb here in between the linen and the next diamond so that I'm not catching the next diamond. And I'm going to go through to that little, I think this one's called Theo, the little ones with the ducks on it. I love this print. I've got this in a couple of colorways. It's gorgeous. And again, making sure that these seam allowances are out the way and we're not catching any of those. And so now we're back on to the last side of the star, and we're going to again pivot. So we can turn it up like that and then pivot round so that we can be on the homeward stretch. So put a few pins in, match our ends again. And you can probably see here, I've been a bit more liberal with my seam allowance for my linen. It's actually a bit bigger down here, and I don't know why. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it was late at night, who knows. But that doesn't matter, because if the most important thing you need to remember, the difference between hand piecing and machine piecing is that we're not lining the edges of that linen and the Liberty up. It's the sewing line that's the important thing that we line up. So we're on the back here at the Theo, and the little duck print, or maybe it's goose print, I don't know. And we're going to do a back stitch, and then we'll just sew to the end. Always smoothing, especially if you get, 4 or 5 stitches on your needle, it will basically gather, or you will undo your needle, your thread as well. Helps if you thread the right end, doesn't it? Okay, nearly there. To the end, match your ends up. And then do a little back stitch. And then a couple of oversews like we did before. Again, making sure that's nice and smooth. And a few oversews. Okay. So it's basically sewn our side piece. And remember what I said, it's exactly the same with the hexagon. You're just dealing with a few more stars and a bigger hexagon in between. So again, I would press that with my hands, with the heat of my hands. And I decided that I was going to press towards the liberties. Press along the seam, and it kind of smooths it out as you go too. Okay, if you wanted to, you could take that to the iron. Now, the most important thing here is this seam here. If you have a look here, we've got the linen here, but we've got all of that. Now, if you want, you can just trim off those top points. I tend to not cut the ends off my templates for people because when you're cutting your strips, I find that if you've got your points cut off here, so that you don't have the bulk here, when you cut up like this, you're then cutting into the next piece. So I always keep my points on just so it's easy to rotary cut your pieces. But yeah, don't be afraid to cut off your ends here, just so you've got a little bit less bulk. And I'd probably wait, if this was a hexagon and I had more stars attached to it, I'd probably wait until I had maybe 4 stars and the hexagon joined together, and then I'd take it to the iron and press it. But for the moment, that's okay. Finger press, that's an edge piece, and I'd probably wait until I had more rows joined together and more edge pieces in between done before I took that to press it. Okay, so that's your Y seams, and so just remember the most important thing is, like you were sewing before, check that your sewing is on the line on both sides as you go. Smooth out so that it's not gathering up, and when you pivot and turn to sew the next piece, make sure that you're keeping your seam allowances free and not being caught up, and that gives us freedom to press however we want. Okay, and if you have a look here, if these were sewn down a particular way, if they were pressed down a particular way, we'd end up with more bulk. So the fact that they're free and we can press however we want to make things sit flat, and also give us a nice line if you're going to hand quilt up against, or even if you're going to get someone to machine quilt it for you. If your pressing is good, it stops you have a little bumps and things. It just gives you a really nice texture, I think, Anyway, enjoy sewing your linen pieces into your 6-pointed stars, and yeah, show me some pictures of your Linen Sisters quilts taking shape. Either email me or show me on Instagram. I'd love to see them. Anyway, take care and enjoy.